The United States is one of the richest countries in the world, with a GDP of over $27 trillion. But behind this bright image lies a darker reality. The nation still faces a staggering poverty crisis. Despite its immense wealth, 38 million Americans still live in poverty. How is this possible? It may be shocking, but it's the truth. These numbers tell a harsh reality. Poverty in the U.S. isn't just about income. It's about race, systemic inequality, and policies that fail to support struggling families. So why hasn't this crisis been solved? The answer lies in wage stagnation, rising costs, and policies that keep millions trapped in a cycle of poverty. And government solutions, they're failing to provide real change. In this video, we're diving deep into why America, despite its immense wealth, can't seem to end poverty, breaking it down with real numbers and data. The truth may surprise you. Stay with me to the end, because understanding this issue is the first step toward change. As of 2024, over 38 million Americans, or 11.5% of the population, live below the poverty line. But it gets worse. About 5% of Americans are in deep poverty, meaning they survive on less than half the federal poverty level, struggling to afford even the most basic necessities like food, housing, and healthcare. Children are among the hardest hit. In 2021, the child poverty rate was just 5.2%, but after pandemic aid programs ended, it more than doubled to 12.4% by 2023, leaving millions of kids vulnerable. And poverty isn't distributed equally. Black Americans face the highest poverty rate at 17.1%, followed by Hispanic Americans at 15.4%, while white Americans experience a significantly lower rate of 8.2%. Wage stagnation and the minimum wage problem. The American dream promises that hard work leads to success, but for millions of low-wage workers, that dream is slipping further out of reach. The federal minimum wage has been stuck at $7 an hour since 2009, despite the cost of living skyrocketing over the last 15 years. In most U.S. states, a single adult needs at least $17 an hour just to cover basic necessities like rent, food, and health care. That means even full-time workers are struggling to stay afloat. Shockingly, 40% of American workers earn less than $15 an hour, making it nearly impossible for them to escape poverty, even with multiple jobs. And while workers scrape by, top executives see record-breaking salaries. In 2023, CEOs earned 344 times more than the average worker, a wage gap that has widened drastically over the last few decades. The economy is growing, but that wealth isn't trickling down. It's being hoarded at the top. For millions of Americans, working harder doesn't mean getting ahead. It means barely surviving. The reality is, wage stagnation isn't just a financial issue. It's a crisis that keeps millions trapped in poverty while corporations and the ultra-wealthy continue to thrive. America prides itself on being the land of opportunity, but in reality, wealth is concentrated in the hands of a few, while millions struggle to get by. The richest 1% of Americans now own 32% of the nation's wealth, a share that has been steadily increasing for decades. Meanwhile, the middle class, once the backbone of the economy, is barely keeping up. Since the 1970s, productivity has surged by 61%, meaning workers are producing more than ever. But their wages have only increased by a mere 6%. That's right. While corporate profits soar, everyday Americans see little to no financial gain. The result? A widening gap between the rich and everyone else, making it harder for average Americans to afford homes, healthcare, and education. Wealth isn't just accumulating at the top, it's staying there. So, if the economy is booming, why aren't most people feeling it? The American dream has always included the promise of home ownership and financial stability. But for millions, that dream is becoming impossible. The U.S. is facing a severe housing crisis, with over 650,000 people experiencing homelessness as of 2023, the highest number in decades. And it's not just those without shelter who are struggling. Rent prices have skyrocketed, with the median rent now at $2,000 a month. A 30% increase in just the last decade. This isn't just an affordability issue. It's a crisis that's reshaping American society, pushing more people into financial instability, while the wealthy accumulate more property and wealth. If owning a home is becoming a privilege instead of a right, what does that mean for the future of the middle class? The U.S. government claims to have safety nets to support struggling Americans, but in reality, these policies often fall short. Welfare programs, for example, are supposed to help lift people out of poverty, yet they only succeed in raising 10% of recipients above the poverty line. That means millions remain stuck in a cycle of financial hardship despite government assistance. Healthcare is another major barrier. 27.5 million Americans remain uninsured, and even those with insurance face skyrocketing medical costs. A single medical emergency can send families into crippling debt, forcing them to choose between paying for treatment or keeping a roof over their heads. Meanwhile, higher education, once seen as the key to financial success, has become a financial burden. Student loan debt has surpassed $1.7 trillion, leaving graduates drowning in payments and delaying homeownership, marriage, and even retirement savings. For those caught in the criminal justice system, the struggle is even worse. Formerly incarcerated individuals face an unemployment rate of 27%, making it nearly impossible for them to rebuild their lives. Without stable jobs, many fall back into poverty or even return to prison, creating a never-ending cycle. These systemic barriers aren't just unfortunate side effects, they're baked into the system, making it harder for millions of Americans to escape poverty. So, if the system is failing so many, who is it actually working for? There are clear solutions to poverty in the U.S., but they all face significant obstacles. Raising the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour could lift 5 million people out of poverty, giving millions of workers a real chance at financial stability. Yet, despite strong public support, political gridlock has kept the minimum wage at $7.25 since 2009, leaving millions struggling to afford basic necessities. Another bold idea is universal basic income, UBI, which would provide $1,000 a month to every American. Studies suggest this could cut poverty by 40%, giving people a financial cushion to cover rent, food, and emergencies. However, opponents argue it would be too expensive and discourage work, despite evidence showing that financial security actually increases productivity. Housing is another major crisis, yet solutions exist. Experts say that a $100 billion investment in affordable housing could reduce homelessness by 50%, but housing projects often face bureaucratic delays, local opposition, and underfunding. Instead of prioritizing housing for working-class families, policymakers often cater to developers building luxury apartments that most Americans can't afford. And then there's taxation. In the 1950s, the top tax bracket was 50%, helping fund infrastructure and social programs. Today, billionaires and corporations exploit loopholes to pay as little as 8% in taxes. Raising taxes on the wealthiest could generate billions for anti-poverty programs. But powerful lobbying efforts and political resistance have kept the tax system tilted in favor of the rich. The truth is, we know how to reduce poverty. The challenge is overcoming the political and economic interests that stand in the way. If change is possible, who will have the courage to make it happen? What do you think needs to change? Should the government do more, or is there another way? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching.